Alright, another draft physics video presentation. I think we'll still be talking about some two-slit kind of a conversation. I have to keep beating it to death. I think I'll go over it one more time. But whatever. See how it goes. So this Mickey Farley, this fake person, this troll for 6 years or 7, whatever it's been, anonymous account after anonymous account after anonymous account, hiding behind John Wayne, these ballless people with their little plastic, fake faces, like anonymous, just anonymous cowards, overtly saying, I'm an anonymous coward throwing shit, from a rock, from behind my little rock. And pathetic. And he draws pictures and characterizations of other people in an effort to malign them as some sort of octopus or some other iron kind of monster when they're the real monster. Just a insipidly insane, truly insane, hypocritical troll. Okay, I mean, obviously the byproduct of, I could draw pictures of the parentage. I could go through the evolution of the troll. And obviously, we got a skanky slutosaurus mother and, a cowardly ogre. I think that's how you get a troll, right? A skanky slut and an ogre have sex, and you end up with a troll as the offspring. So yeah, I could draw pictures of it. I think that'd be a waste of everyone's time. But anyway, so yes, he's got some sort of complaint, like I'm controlling something. When all I'm doing is making arguments, and you're making pathetic counter arguments. That's all that's taking place. So let's jump a little bit ahead, see if he says something reasonable or rational, which is pretty much impossible for trolls, right? All their teeth fall out if they say anything honest.
So this is a sort of a depiction of his argument. This is an octopus, and it's
it's just a waste of time. What's this stupid drawing? Pathetic.
And he's wearing a woman's blouse because he actually is on tape wearing women's clothes.
Yeah, and I do it really well. I don't do it looking like a woman, right? So this is how he counter argues the fact that he's the one, that takes on girl personalities. Someday he just feels like a girl. So he's the one who does that, and this is how he responds. It's with this lame crap because I put on whatever's around. I'm not too particular about clothes, obviously. Yeah. So, but anyway, so pathetic. Your mother's a slut. Your father's a moronic ogre. He obviously drooled his whole way through life. Probably had to pay the slut. Okay, so this is useless. More.
In one of his debates with Logan, I think the only debate.
Yeah, right. The pointless, idiotic debate where he kept saying the same thing over and over again. What if there's a God? I don't have to play what if. Don't have to do that. Anyway.
And contradicts himself repeatedly.
Alright, so irrelevant to the physics argument entirely. So he can't separate subjects at all. Can't narrow his focus ever. He's only got one eye. He's a cyclops too. I forgot about that. Trolls are often cyclopsic.
You claim that the detectors, so these never happen, these detectors. No one's ever detected.
Never happened.
Right. So yes, it's a fact that it's never happened. There's no fucking published documented experiment with detectors detecting photons or detecting electrons. It never happened, and yet they keep citing it. What would happen if the detectors are turned on? There never was a detector. It never happened. It's a complete fantasy just to support, because their web evidence is so weak, they have to lie about it. It's quite obvious. That's when people start lying, is when they have weak evidence. Shit. It's kind of obvious.
Okay, why don't you read the fucking sentence? Okay, the sentence says, you claim that the detections in the troughs. Okay, so you might have to read the rest of the fucking sentence to know what this guy's talking about. Who is not me. It's just somebody. There's lots of people that like to comment on your channel, and they don't all agree with you. Buddy boy. Buddy guy. You claim that the detections in the troughs are too numerous to be just noise, referring to the Vertasium video.
Yeah, that's right. The little detector is moving across the screen, right? They're moving it to different positions. Okay, so there's hundreds of photons detected, and the detector was not in a position for 3 minutes or something, okay, to collect a whole bunch of noise. It can only collect 3 noise bits a second. So it can't collect hundreds, in the amount of time they're detecting in the different locations. So noise doesn't account for the huge volume of photons collected.
Okay, so notice that this comment has a timestamp. And the comment is on the video, DraftScience debunking the debunkers, too slant light. So if we actually go to that timestamp, 2240.
Yes, we have three noises a second.
So another experiment, here, there was more.
Okay, so he says in the other experiment. Now, what experiment? Where? What experiment? What are you talking about?
The one you linked to, retard. The one you linked to. The little propaganda piece for the people selling the $7,000 device. I pointed out that Veritasium is using the same $7,000 setup that you posted a link to, whose data says it goes to actual zero. And I'm just pointing out how Veritasium did the experiment. He couldn't get it to go to zero. So how did they make it go to zero?
Talking about? Why don't you give us some context to your dribble words?
I did give context, so that's just stupid. So really great argument there. Wrong.
Is that too intellectually?
What, you already forgot the document you linked to? You already forgot?
Is that too have too much integrity? You don't have enough integrity to do that?
Noise, and then should have been just noise. Okay,
so the ticking in the other video is too much noise to be just noise. Okay, so what the fuck are you talking about? Oh, it so happens that we have that video and we can look at it. So that timestamp's at 248.
There it is. There's the image, right? This says hundreds here. Hundreds of extra photons. Hundreds of them in each location. There's hundreds of them. Not 3. Hundreds.
So this is what he's talking about. He's saying that, and again, this is 6 photons a second. So the way that this is set up is it's detecting photons.
It went to 3, 4, 6, 3, so. But anyway.
After they pass through the slit, and it's detecting them in a particular location on the, so it's picking a x coordinate, like right here, and it's detecting how many photons are reaching that point. Okay, it's not detecting...
Right, and this chart shows, 20, 30, small numbers all the way across here. So it's not real zero because there's still a little bit of noise in there, right? Yeah, 20, 30 at the most, not hundreds.
All the photons that reach every point on the screen on the photodiode, it's only detecting photons at one point. Okay, and we can prove that.
It's not a photodiode, it's a photomultiplier for this experiment. But regardless, doesn't really matter.
Because a little bit later, we'll see a clip where he's showing that the number of photons decreases when you open a second slit.
Yes, and I pointed out how that is obviously just an edited clip. I mean, all he shows you is that. He doesn't show anything else. He doesn't show the pattern. He doesn't show what you're actually getting. He just does the little clicky thing. And I said, if you have the filter on, of course that's going to work, because the filter is saying, I don't count photons that are coming too fast. So clearly the filter would abolish the normal signal, and when you reduce the signal, you'd actually increase the number of photons that you detect, because you're not canceling all the ones that are coming too fast, obviously. So I explained it. You're not countering that explanation. You're not. Why don't you just show me how that paragraph isn't right in the document talking about noise cancellation? And you're saying that has no effect, and I'm saying clearly it does have an effect. Did you prove that noise cancellation doesn't affect the results? No. Did he prove it in the experiment? No. He did a little quote-mined clip. He didn't show us, well, this is what the pattern looks like, then I changed this, and this is what the pattern looks like, and this is what I changed, and this is... No, he did one little tiny bit where he got it to work. And I'd say the reason why Veritasium's results aren't the same is because that's not what Veritasium did. He's not as dishonest.
Which is indicative of a point like right here, where you have this many photons reaching the point with one slit open, and then this many when both slits are open.
And obviously the detector is right up against the slits, right? So you can see in this pattern an obvious fact that, look, when one slit's open, the pattern's over here, and when one slit's open, the pattern's over there. That means the detector has to be right up against the slits, right? To have those two humps in two separate locations, they have to have the detector smashed right up against the slits. For what reason? Why? It's not the way the thing is to usually done. You usually have some spacing, some distance.
This many when both slits are open. Okay, so it's detecting photons in a region. Okay, but the funny thing is, it's not even the same video. So he just said before, this lying clown said that the number of detections in this video, I'm sorry, in this video he says this, the number of detections here, I'm sorry, in this video is too numerous to be just noise, because the noise is only 7.
So again, it's, he has to quote mine the evidence. They played it, so I'm just saying it's obviously was down as low as 3. So how much time it spent at 7 versus how much time it spent at 3? I would argue that you're just cheating the facts for your advantage.
So let's actually take a look at this video.
Essentially a Geiger counter for light.
I played this video, by the way, right? And I'm showing that he shows nothing else, okay? He doesn't show anything about any other aspect of the experiment. So he doesn't do anything in this experiment except show one phenomenon by doing one thing. And I'd argue that if you have the noise filter on, this result is anticipatable.
Okay, so if you listen to this, we can, sort of get a rough estimate how many photons are being counted per second. So if we just count out a second.
Geiger counter for light.
So I counted about maybe 12.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. I mean, I'm just saying that that's what you're going to get if you sit there and manipulate the experiment. You can get any number you want, right? So, I mean, it just depends on how bright the light is that you're shining through the two slits and how wide the slits are, right? So you can get that to tick any amount. But the point is if you have a noise filter that's triggered by how close the photons are to each other, that is how quickly they hit the target. And if they're being canceled when they hit the target too soon, like one hits and then another one hits too soon, then this is exactly the result you'd expect.
Which, is about twice as much as this. Maybe, it depends on what second you're,
The individual photons.
So that could be just 6 or 7 photons per second, right? I mean, if you're counting out per second.
Hit random.
That sounds like about 10.
Right. So at that rate, obviously you're getting a lot more photons from the experiment than from noise. So he has 2 slits open, by the way. There's 2 slits open and it's making that much noise. So that's how fast the photons are coming in. So obviously you don't keep the detector at one location for very long at that rate of photons coming in.
And then this is actually a varying number because it's random. That's another thing he said. He said that randomness doesn't exist, therefore any...
Well, that's a whole different philosophical, or scientific argument about what the nature of a random would be. So you believe in a God, right? If you believe in random, you believe in God. Because what the fuck could possibly generate a random? Nothing can spontaneously do anything. Everything is cause and effect. So you don't believe in cause and effect. You believe in magical angels or magical gods that make something fall over or make something tip or, create a fake wind to blow over a sail or something. I mean, how the fuck do you rationally defend the notion of random? Again, we can't synthetically create a perfect random. We can only simulate random because random doesn't really exist. There's no fucking such thing. All you can do is create a lot of variables and therefore you won't know the cause and effect chain. And then it'll look random. But it isn't in fact random. So you actually believe in a random, so you're really just telling me I believe in God. Okay, we got it. You're a God botherer. That's why my dick is so far up your ass in terms of getting you into trouble with your brain. It's because you're just defending God theory. You're just a silly fabulist.
Predicated on using the word random in any form whatsoever is therefore bullshit.
I'm saying it's technically a stupid argument, okay? It's like saying there's a photon that's colored pink. Okay? It's just ignorant. There isn't a pink photon, idiot. Okay, it's made out of more than one photon, and it looks pink, but it's not pink photons. Idiot.
Because random isn't a thing. And although it's true, in theory, in a classical system, if you were Laplace's demon...
In a non-God system, there's no other source of this spontaneous act. I'm just saying, we have this word spontaneous because we're ignorant humans and we see things really slowly compared to the real universe. So we came up with this word of spontaneous. But there's no fucking such thing as a spontaneous event. Nothing spontaneously combusts. Nothing spontaneously anything. It's a stupid concept. It's a cause and effect fucking universe. Or you're a God botherer.
And you could calculate the location of every single photon and every particle and calculate not only its position, but also its speed and its momentum. You could, in principle, though not in reality, but in principle, calculate the position of every other photon, millions of years into the future in a classical system. Okay, of course, in quantum mechanics, we know that there's inherent improbability.
We know that there's inherent improbability. No, you say probability, not improbability, right? You just said improbability, didn't you? Well, it doesn't matter.
Or probabilistic, indeterminate.
Yeah, indeterminate, except it's probabilistic. And so he really thinks that this is one of the good arguments for physics, for their physics, is their good argument is we believe in random, we believe that things happen because there's a law in the universe that says probability must happen, that if I do actually flip a coin, he actually thinks when I flip it fast enough that it spins a few times, now the randomness is taking over, the quantum world wins. But if I flip it really slow and I can guarantee a head each time, okay, proving there's no randomness compelling the coin to do something, well then, but that's silly an argument. He really thinks that when you roll dice at Las Vegas, you're randomizing the dice by some special process that randomizes dice. That you're not just changing the environment in which the dice are going to interact. I mean, this is how bad it is that I actually have to make an argument defending that no, there's no magical force that blows tires out on the street. They don't blow out spontaneously. They don't just say, I'm having a bad day, I'm going to blow up. He really believes that's the way it is. Because there's a statistical chance the tire will blow up. It just happens because it knows there's a statistical obligation. I have to fulfill my statistical obligation, so I have to be a flat tire today. I mean, it's so fucking bad. It's so irrational. I mean, how can anybody be this fucking stupid?
We're going to see in the system itself. But even if we made the unwarranted assumption that there wasn't, we would still have situations where there are random distributions, like a Geiger counter or a photon detector.
Yes, more things that are happening on the really small universe at a speed that's so much faster than we could calculate or watch. And so he finds it miraculous that we get confused when 1 billion events are happening in 1 second. That somehow we don't follow along perfectly. But he thinks it's magic, okay? When the 1 billion events are happening, it's not because there's 1 billion events that we're getting lost and we can't see the pattern. No, it's magic. The magical God or the angel went in there and fiddled with the reality for us and changed it. I mean, it's so fucking stupid.
Like we have here, which is detecting cosmic rays. Okay, this number is, again, when we use the word random, it means unpredictable. It just means we don't have enough information to predict the number.
Yes, exactly my point. We don't have enough information. That's not what you're asserting. You're asserting that there is no information, that there is no real physical circumstance causing the event. That's your assertion. You're saying it's some sort of ambiguous condition. It doesn't have a condition. It just magically decides to be something at some point because the magical button says be something now in a something else, in a something place, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's just gooey nonsense. It's such a mushy pile of crap as an explanation for events. It is worse than walking into court as a lawyer and then start telling the invisible man story to get your client off. I mean, it's so bad.
You asshole. It means that if you are given a state like this, there's no way for you to predict. I mean, you can predict within a range. You can say, well, it's got to be between 4 and 10.
Well, you know that there's no probability that 200 photons are going to show up at each location. Yeah, you know, if there's only 4 or 5 or 7 noise photons per second, that there's no way you're going to collect 400 of them in a second.
11 with 99% certainty. That, in that sense, it is predictable and it's not random. But no, you can't predict exactly when every photon is going to hit. Okay, and that's called random. That's what the word.
I'm sorry, that's not what the word means. Just like spontaneous doesn't mean, well, not really spontaneous. I mean cause and effect, but beyond our capacity to understand. That's not what the word means, okay? That's not what the word was invented to describe. Okay, it's a magical word, and it really shouldn't be used by scientists because its technical definition is religious.
It means. Okay, but again, this is the main point. This video is not the same as this video. You are saying that this.
No, what I'm clearly saying is the other video is demonstrating something that if Veritasium could have demonstrated, he would have. He would have turned the same little knob and made the same thing happen, and he couldn't do it. So clearly, I'm arguing that clearly it's been engineered to show you something. It isn't. It isn't the reality. So it's just as much a cheat as little fatty Ken's ferrocell bullshit.
This noise is too, this clicking noise is too numerous to be accounted for by cosmic rays. And, well, of course it's not, because in this video, the laser is turned on. He's counting photons that are coming through the...
So he's somehow, like I said, I played the video and gave my explanation. He thinks my explanation is these are random photons coming through. The extra ones. No. It's called a noise filter. Go look it up. Filters that filter noise. They can filter it for lots of ways and lots of standards. And it says right on your own documentation. It's right there in the paragraph. Oh, you can use our great little noise filter and obliterate half your results. We'll pretend real photons are fake photons.
Double slit as well as background. I don't even know if it's background noise. I think he's filtering for the background noise.
So he's just too stupid. No, he's filtering for the volume of photons. And when you lower the volume, you'll get more photons because you're filtered out the ones that came too fast. I mean, I've already made the argument, but whatever.
In this video, but I don't know. We don't know that.
All right, well, this is just going on and on, so I'll change the subject a little bit, and we'll go over the stuff that he hasn't accounted for and hasn't dealt with and, will never and can't ever. So this is all about this two-slit experiment and why there's this change in what kind of pattern you get based on what slit is open and all this kind of crapola. All right, so I could start the experiment by just doing the single impediment, which basically is the same as the single slit in terms of the pattern you get. All right, very similar. So because it's really just about surfaces. And so the point would be is depending on how wide I make this slit, the real argument is all you're really doing is measuring the distance between this line and to some point and the line that starts at the other slit and this line. And they have a difference. And the difference is going to be they're notched based on wavelength. So depending on how many wavelengths of the light, so if you're using 500 nanometer light, you can almost see that, then, and this slit is, let's say, a micrometer, no, we'll go much bigger, whatever, a quarter of a millimeter, you could, well, let's just say, we're just going to say that we know the slit width is 200 times the wavelength of the light. So it's 200 of these little notches will fit in this space. So this space has 200 little notches in it. All right. Well, then okay, that when these two lines, if I arc them back to parallel, right? So they're two equal lines now. So they have equal distance at this point, and they have unequal distance at this point. All right, and this has all of the unequal distance is here, and here there's no unequalness in the distance. And all you're basically saying is I move these two lines, right? The one that's longer than the other will get shorter and 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 shorter. And the fact is, it'll get shorter and shorter and shorter where the notch is laying up 200 times. Okay, so it will tell you how many wavelengths you have here, how big this impediment is here. It'll perfectly reveal it for you right here. So you can know exactly how many little bars you're going to be making. And it won't tell you how many you'll see, because obviously some of them will be so few photons that you won't see them. But it'll tell you how many bars you're really working with. And you really do know that this is just about angles, right? So that if I project this on a linear straight line, I'm doing something technically really stupid, right? Because this line can go infinitely in that direction, and there will be no infinite pattern. So we know the pattern has real, it's 90 degrees to 0 degrees, okay? It doesn't have any infinities in it. And so, what you're ending up doing, because you're broadcasting it at such a stupid angle, just like if you broadcast a movie really, really wide, people's, everything would get stretched and start getting distorted. And a person's nose could be 3 miles long. Out here, a person's nose would be 3 miles long. Because everything gets distorted as you go on a flat line. So you have to view it on a curved line to see what it's actually doing. Because you're going to make a bar this size here will end up being this size out here. And it gets worse and worse and worse as you go down further of these angles. So obviously projecting it on a flat screen is not going to be fair to the pattern. So that's something they should say right in the beginning, is that their math will never predict this correct pattern because it's never going to account for all that distortion. All right, but this is the definition of the experiment. So all we have is, originally we have one distance. We just have the impediment, whatever it is. That's all there is in the experiment. So let's start with that. So I'm just pointing out, you can just do the math. You can just, if you make the slit small enough, you only have pattern on each side. If you only have a wavelength of distance, if you make a really small slit, a 500 nanometer slit, you're just going to get one little hump on either side, and that's it. Because there's only one wavelength of difference in the whole experiment. All right. So you have the single slit, and so now what's happening is you understand now that it's going to create a pattern that's going to be dependent on this distance. That'll tell you how many notches will be in the pattern. It'll tell you how big the blocks will be. So if it's a really small slit, the boxes will be very big, and if it's a very long, wide split, if it has many wavelengths in it, then you'll get smaller and smaller blocks. Okay, so that's pretty elemental. All right, so what happens when I add another, let's say I add a surface. Okay, so now I have two surfaces. I have these two surfaces plus I add a new one. So it's whatever, the 3-surface experiment. Well, now I have another source, right? So now I'm not doing just this, where I send a piece here and I send a piece from here, and they end up in phase. That is the rulers line up, right? If they're two rulers, if these are just two different lines, you can understand that the rulers would be lined up such that notches end up lining up. Okay, so the 1-inch notch matches the 3-inch notch on the other ruler, kind of thing. So the length differences mean that phase lines up. Didn't draw that very well, but you get the idea, I think. So as you move, the lines go in and out of phase. You line up the 1-inch with the 3-inch, then you line up the 1-inch with the 4-inch, and then you line up the 1-inch with the 5-inch. You can make these distances line up on the notches. The notches on the lines line up, and you can understand as you move it, that happens, and that happens as many times as there are wavelengths in these differences. So I've added the third source. What's the third source going to mean? Well, it means you have another ruler. It means you can now line up 3 sources, all right, and have even more light. So you can line up it. You can line it up with this line. These two can match, be in phase, or these two can be in phase. So you've added more possibilities to remake a photon. All right, and then obviously the next step is to put another surface over here, and that surface gives you more, okay, possibilities. Now you can line up these two, you can line up these two, you can line up these three, and you know, so you have 4 sources now of capacity to rebuild. So it increases the magnitude. So the point is that in this silly experiment, the idea was that the 2 slits are open. Properly erase. Okay, so the 2 slits are open, and you're getting, let's say, 20 clicks on the receiver. So you're getting 20 clicks of light. And the idea is he closes one of these slits, so he's eliminating 2 sources, all right, and he gets 40 clicks. So somehow he got twice as much light when he closes one of the surfaces, you know, indicating something just bizarre. I mean, how can that be possible? You've closed 2 sources, and now you're getting more light at a location than you were getting before. It wouldn't make any sense. And it can't make any sense. It's just stupid, right? So it's not what the Veritasium result shows. What the Veritasium result shows is that what you're going to actually do is, yes, you're going to increase 2 more sources, you'll get more photons. So unless you're using noise cancellation, you can't possibly close one of the slits and get more light. You only get more light because when you had these open, the rate at which the photons were coming was this rate. And the noise filter was saying, I cancel anything that are this close. If the 2 photons come this close, I cancel them, right? And so the obvious thing is now, you know, the photons are coming much slower, okay? So they're further apart from each other, but you've eliminated 2 of the sources. So now it counts these photons because they're far enough apart. And so that's the simple explanation for why they got the result they got. But the idea is, the fundamental idea is that, yes, when one slit is open, you have 2 sources. Okay, so if this is the only one open, you close this one. You know, some easy way to close is just to put a line over it. Then you're going to say, okay, what am I getting in terms of photons? Well, you're only getting 2 sources, so you can only make photons at certain places where the 2 sources can line up, okay, and be on phase. And that's all you're going to get, okay? And so that'll be a certain amount of light, and the pattern will be a certain shape depending on how wide that slit is. And this one's going to make the same because it's the same slit width. So if you open this one and close this one, you're just going to get the same basic pattern. Okay, now if you're really close, the 2 patterns might be a little bit off each other. You know, they might be because they're going to be separated by this tiny distance, a millimeter or whatever. But if you're really close to the experiment, doing the experiment, then you're going to only be moving a tiny few millimeters. And that's apparently how the device is set up, which is, I think, a pretty big flaw, and why it doesn't get much of a pattern. If it was a little further away and you could move it more, then you could get more of a pattern. But anyway, more detail. And that's all you're getting. So you're either getting 2 sources or 2 sources, right? Those are the 2 choices. These 2 sources, 2 sources. And the point is when you have both of them open, all right, you're getting 4 sources. So now you have 4 sources, and it's a multiplicative thing. So the more sources you have, the more you get. So it increases the total amount of light quite dramatically with 4 sources. But it's still on top of this stuff. And that's what the Veritasium video demonstrates, is that the pattern is still on top of this light. No place goes to 0. There's not a place that has light with 1 slit open. Okay, so there's light here with 1 slit open, and then there's light, you know, here with the other slit open, and all of a sudden when I open both slits it goes to 0. That doesn't happen, is the argument. So anyway, yeah. So he's not countering those actual arguments.
Do we? Because you're just being disingenuous by making this argument that the noise here is too numerous to be accounted for by radiation. Well, we never never expect it to be 7 per second, because in this video the lasers.
So again, he's not arguing my argument. He's not playing my argument, making, he's misparaphrasing me completely. I didn't make any argument about noise being a factor in this guy's experiment. I didn't say it was noise. I never said that. I said it was noise cancellation. He's canceling the actual signal, is my point. He's not canceling noise. Sometimes a noise filter cancels the actual signal. That's why you have to use them very carefully. That's my assertion, shithead.
Turned on. And here, the laser's turned off.
I can't block all the light out of there. Plus, there are cosmic rays passing.
Okay, so again, you can't block all the light out of the apparatus. So notice that there's light in this room. If you look at this room, there's actually light. And he's not able to block all of the light. An occasional photon will slip through the crack.
Well, that's why it's a $7,000 device, right? It's because you can't block all the light. Well, that's a pile of crap, okay? It's the photo detector, all right? Is the fact is it picks up all kinds of different radiation. So, yes, you can't make it pick up nothing. You can, but then you turn down its sensitivity and then it doesn't pick up what you want it to. So you have to accept some level of noise as part of the signal.
And that's called background noise. You're the one who bitches about background noise when they do the LIGO experiment, aren't you?
No, I don't. So I don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Where did I make the background noise problem? I made the problem that you can't filter. See, again, it's dependent on filtering. You think filtering is just some easy process. I just hit the filter button. No, it's a lot more complicated than that. And you can do all kinds. You can make all kinds of mistakes in your filters. And I would say that goes for the gravitational lensing images. They're hugely processed images, and there's clearly artifacts in them that can't possibly be physically real. And they're artifacts created by the filters.
Lying sack of shit. Right. So this is the pattern. All right. Well, we'll just go through this some more.
Not possible. In the thoughts.
Okay. So you were just caught in a despicable lie here. You were caught in a lie here where you lied and said that the clicks in this video are too numerous to be accounted for by noise.
So again, I didn't say anything about noise in that video except the fact that it's noise cancellation that's making it impossible for him to detect the real photons. He's not detecting them because he has a filter on that's preventing their detection.
Even though you neglected to mention that in this video the laser's turned off, whereas in this video it's turned.
I don't need to say anything. The fact when the laser's on, there shouldn't be any noise photons then. So that shouldn't be a problem when the laser's on or when the laser's off. So it's irrelevant.
On. You neglected to mention that, which is a lie.
Alright, so that's just a lie because there's no need for me to mention anything. I didn't in any way say anything dishonest about any noise or noise filters. So again, he's not quoting me, he's just paraphrasing and pretending I said something I didn't say. So it's just a lie.
But then you go farther and say that my comment was referencing a detector where they're trying to detect photons in mid-flight, which is not what this guy's saying at all.
Yeah, so I was starting to read the comment. I saw the word detector. I didn't know what he was referencing. So my first impression was, oh, you're talking about detecting photons? You can't do that. Yeah, so what? Yeah, that's going to happen when you read comments. You think they're on one subject because they don't use much detail. So if you're saying it's your own comment, well, then I guess I know you have another spam account.
Well, experiment, I guess you have to say. Are too numerous.
It says troughs, you illiterate.
To be just normal.
Troughs. Here, this is another example.
All right, well, this is a waste of time if this is the kind of stuff that you're going to hang on. It's because I misread a word in the paragraph. So yeah, forget about it. Waste of time.
Is there some sort of an ulterior motive here that might be a guiding principle in what videos you choose to play and not play, and which comments you decide to delete?
No, I've told people, go ahead, post me the video, okay? So post a link to the video you think that's doing it right. Show me the fucking college professor describing the two-slit experiment accurately. Give me the fucking link, and I'll play his video all the fuck day long if he's saying it right. So show me who's doing it right, and I'll play their fucking video. So this is such a lie to imply that I'm sitting here and quote mining. No, I'm begging you to show me real fucking evidence, and you can't do it.
And not delete. Is there some kind of an overarching theme here or some kind of a pattern of behavior that we're starting to see, I wonder?
Well, sure. So as I had stated, the Veritasium video has an interesting context because I didn't realize he was using the same $7,000 device as the other university that graduates 8 students a year.
How many physics degrees do you have?
Doesn't matter. The point is a university that graduates 8 students a year, you can't take too seriously, right? I mean, their physics department, you can't really take it too seriously. And what's the agenda for a college to bother with a physics department if they're only graduating 8 students a year? How does it even financially work? So you got to wonder whether it's creationist kind of university. It's, you know, the Ron Paul University or something. I mean, what the fuck kind of university is it? You know, that graduates 8 students a year.
Anyway, all right. So what Veritasium's data showed
was data, like it's fake data. Yeah, this is just fake. This is, you know, he just manufactured this, pulled it right out of his ass. Unlike.
No, I was actually pointing out how Veritasium did the experiment, and when I originally saw it, I said, "Gee, that's a hell of a lot of noise," and you know, I just didn't understand why there was so much noise in his experiment. And I realized why. It's because it's not noise; it's the signal. Frankly, a part of it, right? So even if you took off 20% of this low number, or 30%, and said 30% was noise, then you would get the proportions that you're really looking for. You really should have about, you know, a third of the light should be the single, the first two, the 2 slits independently, so to speak, and then the extra 2/3 should be what happens because you have 4 sources instead of 2 sources, and having 4 sources means you square how much you get, not just double it. So you get 4 times more photons when you add the 4 sources than you get with just 2 sources. It's one of those R squared things.
We'll see in a minute how careful you are with data.
Okay, you had the pattern was here, and there was a bunch of noise photons here, so you had a bunch of noise photons below the pattern.
Looks like I mean, what? Oh, God.
And then it was 50% of the pattern.
Oh, it was exactly 50% of the pattern.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say it was exactly 50%. I'm saying just looking at it, it's about 50%. So this is the minutia he's picking at.
It doesn't look like 50%. I mean,
it looks like 50% to me. I mean, this looks like if you take an average of where this bottom lump is, okay, and averaged it, it's about 50% to the peak, to the bottom. So it's about 50%. It's about halfway through the pattern, for fuck's sake. You brain dead piece of shit.
If you cut this in half, yes, half of the bottom half is just red bands, but then the top half has half of it missing because it's, you know, a wave pattern. So half of the data is missing in the top half.
Well, whatever that even means. Again, I'm not arguing the existence of the pattern. I'm arguing the existence of any zero here, where all of a sudden I open one of the slits and I get less light in a location. That's what this isn't demonstrating. This isn't demonstrating that, oh, I opened a second slit and look, there's less light. And again, if Veritasium could have done that experiment, he would have. All he had to do was turn a little knob and it closes one of the slits. You don't think he could do that? You don't think he could have just turned the little knob, closed one of the slits, and shown how, look, it goes to 0. I mean, you know, there's more photons when I close one of the slits. You don't think he could have done that? For fuck's sake. Yeah, he could have. The fact is, it didn't happen, so that's why he didn't do it. A little bit of a pause. Yeah, okay. I don't want to belabor this. I mean, it just goes on and on, I suppose. I mean, the argument is that, yeah, there's information on the internet. There's experiments. And all I'm saying is that these two are in conflict, okay? The Veritasium results with the same device are different than the results produced by the device manufacturers. Okay, so what do you make of that difference? I'm just saying that the reason why I have some suspicions about the difference is because the manufacturers are producing are for their purpose of saying this device does all these magical things. So obviously they want to sell this device, and so that's the reason why they might make the results look cleaner than they actually are, that are produced. And the guy making the video, as I pointed out, he's a Christian physicist. You know, Christians are habitual liars. So, well, it is a strike against his credibility. His honesty is in doubt.
You lying asshole. So that would be, what, 67%?
I mean, again, it's the foundational experiment, and they never repeat any of this stuff, right? I mean, the French guy did the single photon experiment, like, 100 years ago, and they don't really bother doing it. And with modern technology, it's gotten a little bit easier, so they're more likely to do it, but they just don't do it with any high precision. It's all done in kind of a slop ass way, but this is their foundational experiment, and they don't care to get the actual truth, to have somebody actually do it correctly, like NASA scientists kind of correctly. So we don't have any of this empirical evidence. We just have pieces of crap as evidence. And this is the way they think physics should be. I mean, even published papers, they don't provide any fucking, the amount of documentation is trivial. I mean, there's been video cameras for almost ever that are really affordable, and they don't even show you video of them doing the experiment or the device or something. I mean, the amount of extra information is so minor. When you think that, they're actually proving something, wouldn't they want to prove it by detailing everything? It doesn't seem they have the same instinct I would have had.
So that's there, right there. That is your version of data. Saying, just declaring, just here.
I'm just redrawing what's drawn in the video, the Veritasium video. And again, I did show it over and over as an image. I kept showing it. All right, so don't pretend I didn't fairly treat it. I mean, it's just, these are just such petty critiques.
Words have meaning. Learn the definition of words before you use them.
Yeah, fuck you. You're the one who doesn't know what random means or spontaneous means.
The fringes are all important. If we remove this and replace it with a double slit setup, okay, so if this was the location of the first hole, and then you pick the whole apparatus up and replace it with a 2-slit wall, then you get this pattern. Okay, you get something like this.
All right, so we know this is a lie, right? So, I mean, do I have to show it again? I mean, it's just too stupid to say, the single slit only makes this pattern. We know light doesn't do that. So why they keep saying things like that are just so dishonest. You're saying, how can he be that dishonest to keep pretending, okay, that a single slit creates just a lump of light? It's just a silly lie. It only does that if it's tiny, if the slit is as small as the wavelength of the light. A 500 nanometer slit creates that blob. Okay, anything bigger creates something more elaborate. My image, there it is. It didn't work for a minute. All right, so there it is. Okay, that's a single slit pattern. All right, it's it's not a blob. It's a pattern. It's there. Okay, yeah, and it's bright in the center, and it gets dimmer as it goes further away for obvious reasons, because the slit is open and some of the light goes straight through without diffracting. So, but that's it. There's nothing, you can't pretend this is just some sort of silly hump, because it's not. And second, you can't pretend that, it is really more photons here in the middle than there is over here. So if you want to just draw it without even having the lines in it, you could draw it as a hump if you wanted to. But they're real photons, and they're really going somewhere. And you never prove that when I combine the two, that this bright spot and the bright spot created by the other single slit, that bright spot becomes a dark spot. That's the part that hasn't been proven. Yet you're asserting it to be a fact.
And somehow that's different than if you started with a 2-slit system. See, I need to change the color. Somehow that's different than if you started with 2 slits and then you just covered one hole and then removed the cover. If you remove the cover. Somehow that's different.
Well, of course it's different in the sense that obviously the light, if you're shooting at a single slit, the middle of the light is going straight through the slit, right? I mean, this is kind of obvious difference, right? If I'm setting up the two experiments, obviously I'm going to get a different amount of light. No matter, even if you're using a laser, it's still coned light, okay? The light comes out this way in a cone, brighter in the center and less bright on the fringes. So if I put it through a single slit that I put right in the middle, well, right in the middle of the cone, okay, you can see that the cone of light hits the slit like this. Now if I change the circumstance and I put the two single slits, okay, I put a barrier on the cone and then I put the slits over here and over here. Well, now obviously the slits are only getting this and getting this. So instead of getting light that looked like that coming through, they're getting this fringe light getting through, right? Because the big light is crashing right into the slit, the surface. So obviously those two experiments can produce a different amount of light is going to be getting through the slit, because you've wiped out the most intense light of the laser you've destroyed, so you only have the fringe light. So yeah, that's an obvious difference. Can't pretend that would have no impact on the experimental results when you have half as many or a quarter of the number of photons going through the slit. Yeah, you can expect a different pattern being visible when you only have 1/4 the number of photons.
Or functionally different. And even more bizarre, because think about it, if there's a functional difference between that, then the only reason that you can account for these dark bands, okay, and again, it doesn't matter if they're dark bands or not. They could be just, you could just have points on the wall where fewer photons reach. It doesn't have to be 0 photons.
Yeah, it has to be for your theory of magical woo to be true. It has to go to less photons. You have to somehow destroy the photons. There has to be something called destructive interference that destroys the photons. That somehow 2 photons that were going to a location, or a photon that was being remade at a location, is somehow magically not being made anymore. Okay, because you opened more source. Because you let more light go through, somehow you destroyed a photon. That's your assertion. That's the fundamental of your wacky mechanics, your silly wooey physics, and it's an assertion you haven't proven. That's all. Don't you think it's kind of an extraordinary claim? You're saying, oh look, I have 2 slits open and there's there's light at a location, and no, you have 1 slit open and there's light at a location, and then I open the other slit and the light disappears. That's your assertion. I'm arguing the evidence doesn't support that assertion, that the 2 patterns do in fact add up to each other plus more. So the 2 patterns create 20%, 20%, and you get 80%, okay, when you have both of them open. Because you're multiplying the potential to remake a photon with each surface you allow to have an influence. So you're adding more light. So yes, you have places that get lighter, but you never have a place that actually gets darker. And that's the fallacy and the fraud and the fake of your physics. Is you make an assertion, your physicists are making assertions, your professors are making assertions, okay, Lewin did it, Shakar did it, I'm trying to think if the other guy actually said that part. I think Lewin did. All of a sudden there's no photons going to the location because you added more light. You add more light and there's less photons. That's your assertion. You're saying that can't be explained by any kind of physics in the universe. Obviously, yes, it can't be explained classically, but I don't think it could be explained rationally, because I don't think it happens. You're claiming it happens. I'm saying the evidence doesn't support your claim. You haven't proven it with evidence of sufficient integrity to be respectable. You have to do better than you assert, or the Christian physicist says so.
It could just be fewer photons than before, because we're opening a slit. You dumbass. If you open a slit...
Right, okay, there's no argument about what's happening. I'm saying, where's your evidence? Where's your documented evidence that it actually happens? And I'm saying you don't have that. All you have is a tiny clip of a Christian physicist who doesn't show anything other than the one thing he's trying to prove, and he doesn't say the words, I don't have a noise filter on. So if you can get a guy, okay, I mean, I'm just saying, it's clear, it's just a statement. You can either tell me that you think that's good enough physics. So you can make an assertion about photons disappearing because A Christian physicist claimed it in a 20-second clip. I'd say that's far short of your obligation.
Classically, you can only be adding photons. You can never be subtracting them.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. If you can show me, like, again, where I showed the Veritasium evidence that contradicts your evidence. It clearly shows that it doesn't go to zero. It doesn't go to less photons. It just goes, there's more. There's a place where there's more now. You've added more, but you never subtracted any. I showed you the other documented paper that's supposed to be done with electrons, but I find that quite suspicious, because I don't think electrons create the double slit pattern. But regardless, I showed you an example where they close one slit and open the other slit. I think they're actually, they're detecting it with phosphorus, which means they can be just detecting X-rays. So they're really doing the light experiment. They just don't realize it because they're too stupid. But anyway, I showed you that paper, okay, where clearly there wasn't any spot that got darker. So you can keep claiming something gets darker when I open another slit, but it's just a claim until you prove it, and you haven't proven
it. Right? Okay, but back to the point, somehow there's a functional difference between taking a two-slit pattern and then covering one up with a piece of material and replacing the entire screen with a one-slit setup. The only way that can make sense is if you believe that this extra, 0.25 millimeter difference is accounting for this change in pattern, meaning that if you took this entire wall and moved it 0.25 millimeters down, then you would get a completely different pattern where this much light reaches.
Yeah, well, of course, moving to something 2.5 millimeters is a lot when you're moving it in front of a laser beam. So yes, you're going to change how much light is going out, and how much light goes out depends on how much light you're going to see and whether there's going to be visible photons. My whole argument was if you can create dark lines, true dark lines between the double slit pattern little blobs, and you have a true black, okay, then if you close one of the slits, you'll see no light, would be my argument. You'll see black. But we don't have that experiment either, do we? No. Because, like I said, none of you have decided to actually prove what you assert.
Here or less. But of course that's obviously bullshit. Right? It just is. Because, again, the rays are going out like this. Okay, it's not that dramatic, but if you move the slit apparatus down, you're still going to get the one slit pattern, the blue pattern.
So again, he's just denying the obvious, which is there are intense portions of the laser and less intense portions of the laser, and obviously if you're moving the slit to the less intense portions, there's less photons going through the slit. Duh. So
that's obviously a nonsensical explanation. And by the way, just to drive home this point even further, let's consider the case where we have a two-slit setup, and we cover one of the holes. And so if we have our wall here, what we get is a single-slit diffraction pattern, like so. Okay. Oh, and we need to draw the fringes over here. That's really important. Okay.
So again, he's using slits that are insanely small to get that as the blob, right? So you would almost argue that now it becomes even more important that you're getting less photons. So the further you move that in almost imperceptibly small slit, that 500 nanometer slit, to get that hump, you'd have to have a 500 nanometer slit. And yeah, so it's really important that you're moving it to the side of the laser. So instead of in front of the laser, you have it over here. So you have an imperceptibly, a terribly small slit, and you've moved it outside of the middle of the laser, and you're surprised that you might not get any photons. Yeah, you might not get any that you can see.
Now, according to In Bedlam, there's a certain level of noise, and we don't know what that noise is, but we'll just assume for the sake of argument. And of course, this is dangerous to just say for the sake of argument, because he'll just bitch about this too. But let's just assume for the sake of argument that everything below here is due to cosmic rays, and everything here is the laser light.
There's no cosmic ray argument. Again, you're the one saying that the noise is accounting for all the signal in Veritasium's results. You're saying it's all noise. So 200 or 250 photons times 12 positions from which you read photons. It's a preposterous, it's a huge number of photons. and you're saying they're all noise photons when the device is only getting 7 photons per second as noise. So how in 20 seconds does it collect tens of thousands of photons, 1,000 or 15 to 3,000 photons out of noise? It can't do it. Okay, 20 times 7 doesn't equal 20,000 or 2,000. Doesn't equal 2,000, anywhere close to 2,000 anyway. Well, it's obviously a lot more than 2,000. Like I said, 10,000. So 7 times 20 doesn't equal 10,000. Just a fact that you apparently aren't aware of.
Well, in order for you to believe that the double slit pattern, which is what happens when you open a second slit.
So he shows opening a slit by closing a slit. Brilliant.
Well, let's actually draw this better. So it looks something like that.
So again, he went below the line. He went below the mark of the single slit being open, as if that's what the results show, that you will go below that line. No, you never go below that line. You just build on top of that line. And that's what I'm arguing the evidence indicates. That's what the Veritasium experiment shows. It shows the pattern on top of the single slit photons. It doesn't show it going below that. It shows it on top of that. So that's the argument. And I'm just saying, go ahead and say that your experiment is better. Go ahead and assert that. I'm saying you have to show me why it's better. And I'm showing you there's reasons to doubt that experiment. First, the manufacturer of the device is producing those results. And second, they're being demonstrated by a Christian physicist. So I have good reason to doubt the credibility of their results. And I have more reason to think Veritasium made an honest effort to find the truth and couldn't produce the results you're drawing. He couldn't produce the reduction in the number of photons.
Okay, in order for you to believe that opening this slit results in this pattern, you would have to believe that the photons that were going through the left-hand slit, are no longer going through there.
Right, again, so that's what's under contention. Again, you're asserting that you have the truth and that you've proven something. I'm asserting that the evidence isn't consistent. The two experiments don't... Veritasium's chart does not agree with your chart.
A pattern like this. Okay, so this is a total contradiction. Okay, and adding contradiction, compounding the contradictions. In Bedlam has also stated in this video that you cannot detect the photons because an electron is so much smaller than a photon that an electron could never, ever, ever in a million years alter the course of a photon.
And this is such a lie. I mean, what an insane lie. It's exactly the opposite point I'm making. There's no way you can look at an electron. It's so much smaller than a photon. And you have to hit it with bits. Each quanta of energy in the photon is going to move the electron. I've made exactly the opposite. I mean, it's amazing that he can get these so fucking backwards. I mean, that's such a fucking lie.
The two just can't interact. Well, if you believe that, then you also are forced, necessarily, I think, to reject...
I mean, how did he even make that up? I mean, what fucking video could he have watched in such an upside-down manner that he could get the impression that I said electrons aren't influenced by photons, when I've said exactly the opposite? Electrons are so tiny.
Reject his explanation of the double-slit pattern. Because according to him,
I mean, tiny in mass. I don't think they're tiny in volume.
All of these patterns are caused by photons interacting with electrons. So that means his entire explanation goes right out the window. And there's nothing...
So another bullshit assertion. Of course, every time... How else do you think we detect a photon except it having to do something to an electron? I mean, that shouldn't even be a physics argument. It's so fucking obvious. There's no other way to detect a photon than to see how much it moves an electron. Shit for brain. It's the only way. God, he's so fucking stupid.
Thing that he can argue. Right? I mean, is there one person with with 2 brain cells to rub together who will stand up and form something in...
Yeah, well, let's see what kind of trolls. Like I said, we see the trolls who commented on your video as if you made a decent argument. So all of these fucking lying sacks of shit. Mayul CS, are you proud of this retarded fucking argument? Do you think that's what I actually said? Electrons aren't influenced by photons. I said that somewhere. 5FW, 2 plus 2 equals 0. Do you believe that this is a decent argument this fucking idiot's making? Null point. What the fuck are you doing here? You don't even speak a fucking language anybody can understand. Well, anyway. I mean, this, you know, Gary's channel has nothing to do with physics. Well, you think this does, you fucking lying sack of shit? You stand by this retarded fucking argument? Oh, amazing. These pieces of garbage, this human crap. Mindless marbles. You fucking dishonest, raggy piece of shit. You stand by this idiotic argument?
Do a spine, take some stem cells and form a spine, and stand up.
Yeah, grow a ball, hiding behind John Wayne. Okay? Yeah. Fuck you.
And go, this guy is full of shit? Please tell me, these 29 people who are thumbing this crock of crap up, tell me one of you has to have a brain who looks at this and goes, this is...
Yeah, do any of these assholes, these 9 fucking morons who thumb this piece of steaming shit up, what kind of integrity do they have? What kind of lying sack of shit are they? And why are you all hiding? All you unaccountable little weasels. You're all anonymous, cowardly little pussies who stand up and make no argument with any kind of integrity. You're like the lying little Christian Scientist.
Shit. Alright. Yeah, you could have done that. Yeah.
So the argument is that the physics professors will point to this as the key to quantum mechanics right here. This goes to 0. So you have 2 slits, you have 1 slit open, and there's light. There's whatever it is, 25%. And then you open the other slit, and you have another 25%. Right?
Okay, be specific. 25% of all the photons that are coming through.
25% of what the total will be when you have 2 slits open, retard. Yeah, and that the 25% turn to 0, and somehow the 0 spot turns into 100%. That kind of argument, retard.
Because we just, as I just pointed out, I mean, this is inaccurate. This should be more like 67% because, you know, we're removing, actually more than that because we're removing all of this area up here where, you know, if there were 50%.
Obviously, the area up here isn't getting removed, okay? So, quite obviously, there's no removal of any photons. They're either added at one place and they're not added. They're added, they're not added. That's the Veritasium results, dumbass. There's no fucking subtraction, fuckhead.
And you would have to draw a pattern like this, right? You're actually, it's a lot more than 50%.
So again, he's saying that somehow there was photons way up here with 1 slit open. There was photons way up here. Now there weren't. So what kind of lie is that? A preposterous one, that's right. There's no photons up here with 1 slit open.
So you're just going to pull a number out of your, right, this is the MO, this is his MO, right? Pull a number out of his ass.
Your MO is to completely mischaracterize and to pervert whatever you can to sit there and make assertions that can't be defended. You have no evidence, you're just going to keep asserting it's true. So it just doesn't matter what the evidence says, it doesn't matter what, you know, again, you're going to tell Einstein that he should have known, yeah, Einstein rings are easy to see.
That number for which there is absolutely no justification to make a fallacious argument.
So again, there's nothing fallacious about my argument that the Veritasium results are not consistent with their argument that photons disappear. That places that were getting photons are getting no photons. That doesn't happen.
And then say, well, see, I concluded based on this faulty premise that X, Y, and Z must be true. Therefore, they are true, and what physics professors are saying is false. Well, no, because you're using a garbage in, garbage out argument. You're taking garbage, 50%, and you're using that as input for your crockish...
No, I'm saying 50% is what Veritasium came up with. That's what the 2 slits independent of each other were producing, and all you're really adding is the fact that now you have 4 vectors. So you have 2 vectors plus 2 vectors. Independently, they only add up to 2. Okay, but when you combine them, you multiply the outcome, like happens in many circumstances. It's just a squared rule. The sphere is bigger than the circle kind of argument. You're adding more sources mean you're multiplying the likelihood of recreating a photon. So with each extra source, you're not adding just the number of the fact of the source. You're adding even more possibility for matches.
Logical syllogism, and then your output, okay, your logical conclusion to your argument is false because you use a faulty premise. That's garbage in, garbage out.
Well, there's no faulty premise. Yours is the lie, okay? You're the one saying there's a photon. You've proven that photons disappear, okay, that they're somehow destroyed. That's an actual fact. That with one slit open, there's light someplace, then I open two slits and that place turns dark. You haven't demonstrated that with evidence. You're just asserting it. That's it. You haven't proven it.
Okay.
And Veritasium's results don't prove it. So you can say Veritasium is an idiot and an asshole, didn't do the experiment right. You say the Christian physicist did prove it. Fine. If you can take his results for being the truth, and I'm saying they're not the truth. They're not an honest presentation of the fact. They're just as dishonest as your silly water wave single slit experiment where you put all the noise in and then say, look at the results I got. It's a pile of shit as an experiment.
You're really dumb.
You're really dishonest.
Okay, that's the argument. That's a fact. Listen to this. He says it's a fact. It's 25%. It's a fact. I mean, I want to see where he's going with this because I'm sure whatever the conclusion is, you can just throw it away.
So I'm clearly just saying that you could say that 50% is made up of the two single slits by themselves, their contribution, and the extra is what happens when you have four sources. So with two sources, you only have the R thing, and then with four sources, you have the R squared.
When you open both slits, okay, so if you do one slit at a time, 25%. The other 25%. Then when you open both slits, 0% of the light gets to the certain location. That's the assertion. It's foundational. It's a foundational assertion.
Well, wait a minute. If it's 0%, that means there was no noise going in the first place, right? So that doesn't even match up with the...
Well, we're arguing that let's just take noise out of the argument. I'm saying less photons. It doesn't matter. Zero, okay, forget the zero number. Less photons. So again, now he's arguing semantics. Bullshit. The point is they're saying where there was light, there's no light. That isn't demonstrated by the experiment.
Diagram you've drawn at all. You're making a completely different... You're just muddying the water. You're not making any sense at all. What the fuck are you talking about? Okay, if the interference pattern causes 0% at that point, then obviously this is more than 25%. Right? The light that comes in... Otherwise, if you added up the photons that came through the left-hand slit and then you added up the ones that came through the right-hand slit, you would have 50%. 50% of what? 50% of this pattern? That means more photons are coming through when both slits are open.
Yeah, that's the exact fact. More photons will be remade when you have four sources than when you have two independent sources. So when you take the two individual slits and you put them next to each other, you'll make more photons. That's because with each vector, with each source, you're not just doubling, you're quadrupling the number of photons you can rebuild.
They're open one at a time, which also violates basic logic, right? Okay, so I know you guys are too dumb to figure that out, but let's say
it's like saying the inverse square law, breaks basic logic, when no, it doesn't. Squares are all used a lot in mathematics, by the way. Okay, there's a lot of phenomenon where the increase is at a squared factor.
You have two slits here, and you cover this one, and 25 photons come through. Okay, if you do that, and then you open this one, and then you close this one, and then 25 photons.
So it's not 25 photons coming through. Again, it's 25 photons that you could manufacture out of the two sources. The two surfaces can only make 25 photons that you can see. There's still 25 broken photons going through, or whatever the number would be. So you're still getting lots of pieces that you weren't able to match with anything. And the point is you can match them by moving these two things into each other, you create more opportunity to make matches out of the pieces left over. So it's like broken car parts go through, all right, and it's how many cars can you put together. Well, if you allow all the four sources to mix, you create more opportunity to make more cars out of the parts.
Get through. Well, if you open both of these, you get 25 plus 25 equals 50.
Right. And my argument of my theory is that's not what you do. So that's where you're failing to understand, okay? Is that that's not how it works. More photons are possible when you mix these two together than them independent. Okay, and that's just because they're sources of parts. You can just add it up. Sources of parts, sources of parts, sources of parts. Obviously, both of these two would have a bunch of pieces they couldn't match, but they will be able to match them if I overlap the two, then I will match more parts. So let's say I had a bunch of C, D's, and F's left over here, alphabetical letters, and a bunch of alphabetical letters left over here. The fact is I'll be able to make a string of 4 alphabetical letters in the right order. If I combine these two, then they either could do independently. So if you just thought of alphabetical letters going through and you're trying to just do A, B, C, create patterns where there's 3 in a row, you could understand that independently of each other, I can have so much of the stuff that has 3 in a row by, the random idea. You randomize the letters going through. You can create so many that you can put back in the right order. And then if I mix the two, though, the two leftovers, the bits they have left over, will now be able to match. And so I will, in fact, get more photons when I overlap those two, because the photons you're not seeing, the photons that were out of phase, the photons that were still broken, will be fixed. It's like, a simple art. Look, you have 2 colors here. It's like you add the red and you add the blue, and you end up with more purple than either red or blue. It's just a fact of the way parts can be combined. And that's just sorry, I hate to disturb you with the fact, but that's the way it works. When this is only a percentage of the light that actually gets reconstructed, you can understand that, yes, both of them have leftover parts. I put those leftover parts together, and now I can make more photons. So, the outcome is more than the sum of the parts. But you have to understand the sum of the parts is there's a bunch of hidden parts still here. Just like in a polarizing filter, the light isn't destroyed by the filter. So, of course, you put a third filter in, you can reconstruct some of the photons that you just broke.
Not 100. It's not 100%. 25 is 50% of 50. So really, that's 50% of photons coming through the right-hand slit and 50% of the photons coming through the left-hand slit. You fucking liar.
All right, so there was no lying. Again, I made the assertion, I explained the fact that it's more photons, that you get the 4 times the number of photons. I went through the whole probability argument and the parts argument. I talked about part store A and part store B and part store C and part store D, and that you get more parts you can put together when you put all the 4 sources into one location. You can make more parts whole. Okay, then if the two are independent of each other, there's less cars you can build. I mean, I made all these arguments, so this is just more lying. All right, so let's see what his little concluding statement. There's the Veritasium thing again, so let's show that again, see if he says anything.
It'd be caused by noise.
All right, so it's caused by noise. It's hundreds of photons. Can't be caused by, hundreds times how many bars there are here. So 400 times the number of bars on this graph, which got to be 40 different positions, 50, maybe more. So tens of thousands of photons. And he says they're all noise. No, they're not.
Right, because this is the noise. Again, this is his actual argument. So I want you to stop and, you can think about this. This is his actual argument. I think you'll find I am being fair. He says this is the number 6. So, we could actually write this down in a formal syllogistic format. Really just to hammer home how fucking retarded it is. So, this is the number, 4. So, premise 1. This is the number 4. or actually it's number 6, but we'll just use 4. And then if we go to this picture
per second.
Here, this trough is the number 120. Okay, number 2. But over here is 120, and therefore 120 is much greater than 4, and so 120 cannot be caused by noise. So this is
right. I mean, unless you have this sitting there for, what would it take? Like I said, 30 seconds. So you'd have to be at each one of those locations for 30 seconds to collect that much noise. And obviously the experiment wasn't done that way.
This is Funny Farm physics argument.
So whatever. This is your silly as shit. Okay, so let's see what else is going to play here.
Per second.
Yeah, per second.
And then if you look at the data, if you run the detector with, and again, this was with the laser off. So with it off, it was like 6 per second. With the laser on, we run the pattern for 1 second, and this is the data. This is after 1 data, and I'll prove it to you because you can play it, where he says the words.
I'm plotting a graph of the number of photons counted as a function of position across the detector. If you have a look after 1 second, the distribution seems random.
Right. So after 1 second, there's 40 photons per location. So that obviously can't be noise. Much more than half of them are obviously not noise, because you have 1 second and you have 40 here, 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 40 here. So you've got hundreds of photons already, hundreds. So how can 7 photons affect hundreds of photons? How could they be distorting the results very much? 7 out of 400? How could 7 photons out of the 400 of them make any difference? Oh, that's right, they really couldn't.
Okay, so this looks like it's approximately, this is less than 6 per second. Here it's less than 6 per second. Here it's about, 15.
Okay, right, per second. So that's all right in 1 second. You can't do all of these in the same second. You can't be at all the locations in the same second. All right, he's saying 1 second of results at each one of these locations. So again, it's more than the noise would be able to produce.
But that's with the laser on.
Seems to be any pattern in the arrangement of those photons.
So how did this turn into this, I wonder? I'll let you think about it for a minute, and maybe you'll try to think. You dumbasses.
Right. So he'd have to have less photons coming in as signal than the noise photons. For the noise to overwhelm the pattern like that, he'd have to have less than 4 coming in per second. Not likely.
I'm talking to Gary's drones. Obviously, my audience is brilliant as hell, but his audience are fucking brain dead, it seems, because they can't even figure this out. By the way,
so again, his credibility is the Christian physicist with the quote mined evidence.
You can actually see in this fucking video.
Take a look.
Okay,
here you have the interference pattern for laser light shining through the 2 slits.
Right. We don't even have a good 2-slit pattern here, which is part of the joke, right? I mean, you're going to analyze the 2-slit experiment and you're going to just pay attention to these 6 bars and that's it. So you're not even going to be searching for the true pattern, which is the real hard dark out here. You're not even detecting those. You're just doing this little bit and saying, oh, there, that's all. That's the experiment. We're done. This little bit is the 2-slit experiment. I mean, on its surface, that's fucking lame as hell.
It's a broad band composed of a series of light and dark spots. The light spots represent places where the 2 waves add together constructively. The dark spots represent places where the 2 waves from the 2 slits cancel each other out.
And again, notice it isn't symmetrical. The fact is that the center bar depends on where, how you match the phase of the openings versus the slit. If they're out of phase, then the alignment of the whole pattern isn't, centered. The center spot ends up being a null, a 0, depending on what slits you use. So you can essentially move the pattern across that bar by changing the phase difference between the outside slits and the inside slits.
destructive interference. And while we're looking at the pattern, I'm going to take the edge of this index card, very carefully cover up one of the slits. We'll see how the pattern changes between the light shining through two slits through one slit. Watch carefully.
Okay.
Let's see.
Okay, now I want to keep your eye right here at this location.
Well, yeah, keep your eye right here. Look at a location and just say, is that truly a dark in between that one? Is that truly a dark in between there? Is there truly a dark there? Is there truly a dark there? That's the real argument. Did you add light, or did you actually create from light to dark? And the point will be is, no, you're just going to see what's underlying that pattern. So it's like a 50% transparency. You can take two transparent images and slide them over each other, and they look so much brighter when you put the 50% on top of the 50%. It looks like more. You added more light, substantially more. But that's just a visual effect. You know, it has to do with how our eyes adjust. It's an optical illusion. There is no dark here between here. There is an underlying pattern that already exists.
Okay, actually, let me see. So if we actually block out the light here, I just want to be very, very careful here.
Yes, it looks very careful.
So I want you to look in between these two lobes of light. We see very little light getting through.
But
the point is, cover one of the slits, and we're going to see how much more light gets through.
Okay, let's do that.
We're just going to do this, and we're going to see how this works. Okay.
Okay, I'm
so
sure I'll be
carefully.
impressed. I'm sure.
Watch it. Okay, all your attention is right here, folks. I know this is emotionally difficult for you to look at this and look at the actual data in real time.
It's coming up both slits.
Oh, look at that. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so look, there's light here. Where
now there's light. Yeah, you see it.
Before.
You see it as more light. I see it as it's just more light. Same amount of light. So the flickering on and off of the card. I don't know why it had to flicker like that, but whatever. Why did it go completely dark before it goes light? If he's just covering one slit, and I thought they had a little thing, the little device they just turned to cover one of the slits. Why is he doing it with a card? Oh, it's a different experiment, I guess. I mean, why is he using a card when he has a little device he can just turn to close one of the slits? Why is he using a card?
So
that's what you get from one slit. Two slits, one slit.
Okay.
Right. You see a huge difference there? No, you don't really, do you? Did you see that getting lighter and darker and lighter and darker? No, you didn't. So he says, look, we're doing it in real time. And it failed to show what he's claiming it shows, which is some sort of dramatic difference where photons just start disappearing.
There are places on the screen.
Okay, so there you go. And this effect would be more dramatic if you didn't have all the lights on in the room. But that's okay, because if you statistically...
Yeah, okay, let's just play it again, okay? So I couldn't see any difference, frankly, in the intensity, so... And so he claims that's enough evidence. He can ridicule people and do all this bullshit.
It would be more dramatic if you didn't have all the lights on in the room.
Well...
But that's okay, because if you statistically, it's just not acceptable at all that there would be that many more photons reaching this point than here if it was just due to chance, right?
So again, it's not due to anything called chance. It's a real universe with real vectors that things travel, by real causes. And the fact is, if you have enough electrons in a row, then you'll have enough variation in the outcome of where a photon's destined to go that it's looks like it's random, but there's nothing random about each photon's adventure through reality. Just like a certain number of people will not be able to jump over a bar that's, say, 6 feet high. And there's a certain probability that most people will fail. Well, there's a real reason why there's a probability. You can say it's just a statistical thing, but we know it has to do with how tall the person is and a lot of things, how flexible they are, whether they get over the bar, and there's only a certain percentage of people in the population that are going to have those attributes. And that's what's going to decide the outcome. Real things cause outcomes, not magic. Your little magical description of reality is just that. It's a silly little kid story, and it's a little fable you're telling us about the magical disappearing photon, because you can't prove it with real evidence. All right. It's just a story told by people with an agenda, and that's it. So it's just a religion. All right, so enough already. Enough of a video. So till the next time and such.